Hey guys, and welcome back to Let's Play Dark Souls. First off, I'd like to introduce you to Brother Uther, our Aryan featured paladin. He is of the cleric class. And I'm just going in here to spend a couple points on dexterity and attunement. We're going to kind of beef these up, unless this gives me an extra attunement slot. Over there on the right. The dexterity is to qualify for a couple of items we're going to be picking up here shortly. So today's session we're going to start off with actually a quick run to go grab a couple items that you wouldn't normally go to pick up at the beginning of the game. So I'm running past NPCs and kind of avoiding this intro area for now, but don't worry, we'll come back and we'll get to look at all of it. You'll notice we're now officially playing online in the realm that other players can interact with. So we're actually seeing messages and stuff on the ground that are no longer from developers, but have actually been left by other players. Now this area is the New Londo Ruins, and it's actually a location from quite a bit further into the game. Although Dark Souls having an open-ended structure means you could really go anywhere. Yeah, we don't really want to be here right now. This place fucking sucks. So we'll just skip it for now, and we'll come back when we absolutely have to. You'll notice that we've used the Master Key here. If you don't start with the Master Key, you have to buy one from an NPC vendor who's not actually that far into the game, but you'll see why we're using it now. This area, the Valley of the Drakes, actually serves as a rather short, kind of not so much a shortcut as a connecting area between a couple of the other larger locations in the game. And like I said before, this is generally from later in the adventure. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sneak up to this obviously totally dead dragon and take his stuff. Yeah, so he wasn't super thrilled about that. But the interesting thing about Dark Souls is while we did drop our souls on the ground, we actually get to keep any items that we picked up. And let's see what we got. Astora's Straight Sword is a really great divine sword. You'll notice that it has a significant attack bonus. If you look on the right side there, we're jumping from 100 to 174. That's because it does magic damage, and the sword actually scales with our faith stat. We also picked up the Dragon Crest Shield, which is a significant improvement over our wooden shield in that it absorbs 100% of physical damage and 85% of fire damage, which is going to be pretty handy for several of the early boss fights. Plus, we look fucking awesome. I mean, check this shit out. Let's check out the moveset. So the basic attack is 3 quick sideways strikes, and the strong attack is a really nice long-distance thrust, which can be really handy when you're in tight quarters. And you'll notice here, this is actually another player standing at the bonfire. Now, he's not in my world. We're close enough that I can see his character standing there. It's one of the really cool sort of ethereal features of multiplayer in this game. Can't really interact, but there he was, nonetheless. Now, this area that we're exploring is called Firelink Shrine. Firelink Shrine is kind of the central hub of all of Lordran. So we'll be coming and going through this area quite a bit. It serves as our sort of main home base. And these are fire bombs. They're a one-time use item that basically explodes like a grenade, hitting one or maybe a couple enemies if they're close to each other, doing a medium amount of damage. Now up here, past this cleric, who we'll talk to in just a bit, is another semi-secret area that's part of the Firelink Shrine, which serves to help give you a small amount of introductory items. So basically we just fall down this little hole and check out this little tunnel. Do a little bit more dropping, and here's some treasure chests. Homeward Bones allow you to return to your last rested at bonfire without losing any souls. They could be pretty indispensable. And here we get a Morning Star and a Talisman, kind of your basic cleric set in case you chose not to start as a cleric. You require a Talisman to be able to cast miracles in the game, which we'll talk about in a second. Cracked Red Eye Orb is an item that is used to invade other player worlds. Now, normally this is a consumed item, however there is a covenant or guild that you can join later in the game that allows you to have an item that does not get used when you do an invasion. Finally, we have Lloyd's Talisman, which has a couple kind of secret uses, but mainly prevents the use of Estus Flask in an area. So your enemies will actually use Estus Flask to heal themselves sometimes, and you can use one of these to prevent that from happening. Now, unfortunately, because of that little secret, we have to kind of skirt past the graveyard, and it seems as if I've awoken a couple of these skeletons, but they shouldn't be too big of a deal. Actually, skeletons can hit rather hard, and they have a decent amount of hit points. So this is actually a rather challenging fight to encounter, especially early in the game. The only reason I'm even holding my own at all is because of the straight sword that we're using. And facing off against two of them is never a good thing. Yeah. Well, with all that excitement out of the way, let's explore the Firelink Shrine and talk to some of the NPCs. Now, this first NPC, the Crestfallen Warrior, is one of my favorite in the game. I find his voice acting absolutely superb. It's so creepy.
Well, what do we have here? You must be a new arrival. Let me guess. Fate of the Undead, right? Well, you're not the first. But there's no salvation here. You'd have done better to rot in the Undead Asylum. But too late now. Well, since you're here, let me help you out. There are, actually, 2 bells of awakening. One's up above in the Undead Church. The other is far, far below, in the ruins at the base of Blight Town. Ring them both, and something happens. Brilliant, right? Not much to go on, but I have a feeling that won't stop you. So, off you go. It is why you came, isn't it? To this accursed land of the undead?
I love that laugh. Well, let's see what else he has to say.
Ah, your face. You're practically hollow. But who knows? Going hollow could solve quite a bit.
So this brings up an interesting point, the difference between undead and hollow. Undead is simply dead and can be resurrected at a bonfire. Hollow, however, means that the undead has actually gone insane, lost his mind, and is now just a mindless enemy, the likes of which we'll be encountering throughout the game.
What? Restoring your humanity? Well, there are a few ways to go about it. Collected bit by bit from corpses. Or you can butter up a cleric and get yourself summoned. And the quickest way, although I'd never do it, is to kill a healthy undead and pillage its humanity. Coveting thy neighbor is only human, after all. What are you looking at? Don't try anything clever. You might regret it.
So the other important thing that he brings up is humanity. Humanity being the human version of undead. You're still undead, but you look like a human. The bonus for being human form means you can kindle bonfires. An unkindled bonfire restores 5 Estus flasks when you rest there. A kindled bonfire restores 10. So it's a good idea to kindle bonfires that you're going to be visiting very often. Here we have a firekeeper. Firekeepers can reinforce our Estus flasks, which basically means that when we use them, they actually fill a few more of our hit points. The flip side being that we need a Firekeeper soul before we can do that. And there are several Firekeeper souls scattered throughout the world. Now, interestingly, if you look up here, you can actually see the giant raven or crow that brought us over here. And we can actually go visit her later, which we just might do. In the meantime, let's chat with this portly cleric.
Hello there. I believe we are not acquainted. I am Petrus of Thoroland. Have you business with us? If not, I'd prefer to keep a distance, if possible.
It's kind of rude.
Hello there. I realize that I have requested that we retain our distance, but I also want you to know that it is not meant in ill will. Here, take this, as a token of peace. No, go ahead. It's for you. Oh my, you again. Oh, I know. How about this? I have to await my companions here anyway. So what if I were to teach you some miracles? Would that please you? Very well. Then first, a covenant with the gods. Now let me share my miracles. Only their ultimate effectiveness will be determined by your efforts and your faith.
Ah, our first vendor. But first let's learn his gesture. He teaches us how to shrug. That seems useful. Now then, this vendor sells several important miracles that we'll be coming back and picking up over the course of the game. Right now we don't have nearly enough souls.
Come
we have
again.
0.
The effectiveness of the teachings depend upon your faith.
But in the future we'll be returning and picking up a couple of his miracles. And let's try out a gesture, because why not? We have a few gestures to choose from. And they're basically ways for you to communicate with other players if you see them in the game. There's no actual voice chat integrated with the game, although I don't think anything would prevent you from using an external voice chat. Now then, enough with the exploration. Let's actually start playing Dark Souls. Combat in Dark Souls is basically a series of puzzles, if you really think about it. Basically, you're faced with a large number of enemies, and you need to figure out how to interact with all of them without getting your ass handed to you. So you'll note we've had a couple guys down here, we got this armored dude, and above, there's a friendly fellow throwing fire bombs at us. Once the ones below are dispatched, we can move upstairs and try not to get faked out by the firebomb throwing one, because this guy will come and stab you when you try to kill him. Now we can safely kill this one, just in time for this guy to come down and try to surprise us. It's a good example of how this game really works, which is basically you encounter enemies, you learn about them, you find out that this dude is actually baiting you into coming up here while his friends will jump on you from behind, you die, but you've learned something. Dark Souls, every death should teach you something, otherwise you're not paying enough attention to what's going on around you. Souls of the Undead are basically XP items. They'll be scattered throughout the entire game. We'll be collecting a lot of them over the course of the adventure, and basically we can use them to give ourselves a set number of souls. And they range from 200 in this one to, I think the highest number is 25,000 in a single soul. Like I said, we'll be finding a lot of those. And here we'll be returning to quite some time. The true Dark Souls starts here, in the Undead Berg. I want to take just a quick second and apologize for the slowdown. This is the computer version of Dark Souls, and it's not particularly well optimized for running on PCs. I have installed a fix, but it doesn't seem to be working that well. I will continue to investigate and hopefully get it resolved. And there's a good example of what happens when you fall for the game's many traps. You go in for the guy who's completely obvious and get stabbed in the side by the dude who's hiding in the damn house. There's a board sticking out of me. Now, Brendan asked me about the white fog, because I hadn't shown it in the last game, or talked about it in the last episode. Basically, white fog acts as different barriers for different areas of the game. Generally speaking, when you walk through a white fog, it's just going to open up a new section of the level. However, sometimes the white fog will actually be between you and a boss, and it will reappear as soon as you walk through it, meaning you'll have to fight the boss to be able to escape. This is another classic Dark Souls trap. We got the undead hanging off the side, and as soon as you come down and feel comfortable, they pop up to stab you in the face. This is actually a side area in the level that's just useful exploring and has a few good items in it. It's worth mentioning again that the level design in Dark Souls is absolutely phenomenal. It's what makes the game enjoyable. Every new level feels very unique. There's a lot of really good exploration aspects to the game, and as you'll see in just a little bit in this episode, the way levels tie in on themselves is actually quite brilliant. And I love a game that makes me fight a bunch of dudes and then gives me rubbish. Like, literally gives me rubbish. Fucking Dark Souls. As you can see, this little side jaunt here will drop us right back off at the beginning of the level. Now this is an example of humanity. I picked some up earlier too. Basically, I could use that item to add one humanity to the counter at the top of the screen, which could then be used for things like turning myself human, kindling bonfires, etc. Humanity also gives a passive bonus to your item discovery value. So up to 10 humanity will give you up to, I believe it's 100 bonus to your item discovery. The maximum bonus to item discovery is 410. I'm not really sure how that translates into a percentage, but basically it's quite a bit more often versus not very often you're going to find drops. Okay. Here's another classic example of a Dark Souls encounter. You've got 3 undead facing off to you on the ground, and a dude overhead shooting arrows at you. If you don't take your time and be patient and just carefully dispatch to the enemies, you can really quickly get overwhelmed and find yourself running back from the last bonfire you rested at. You can actually see the next bonfire over there in that other room. I'll be skipping it for now because I'm going to be going backwards just a bit to go check out another side area. This next encounter can actually be rather difficult, especially if you get both of them. But if you just carefully inch forward, you'll only pull the guy on the left, which makes this encounter doable at low level. These spearmen can be rather difficult, but we do have one secret weapon, the kick. The kick is a relatively easy to execute maneuver, but it does leave you in the open. However, if you're successful, it will knock aside a blocking opponent's shield, leaving them open to attack. It makes these guys actually rather easy to dispatch, if you can pull it off. And what's this guy doing? Just hanging out. And here's our first normal merchant of the game, the Undead Merchant.
Now, you seem to have your wits about you, hmm? Then you are a welcome customer. I trade for souls. Everything's for sale.
That's just lovely. This guy sells some pretty important items. He's got the guidance soapstone, which is what allows you to write messages on the ground. He has the bottomless box and a repair kit, which are indispensable bonfire buffs that basically allow you to do inventory management as well as actually repair the durability of your items. Durability is not a thing that I've mentioned before, but basically every time you use a weapon, its durability goes down. Every time you take a hit, your armor durability goes down. If your weapon or armor breaks, it basically starts to suck.
Time. Go and fall off a cliff.
Now, one thing that I actually haven't covered yet is how our miracles work. So you'll notice that we have the heal miracle equipped, but we have no way to cast it just yet. So let's equip a talisman. As a cleric, we started with the canvas talisman. You'll notice that I'm comparing the mag adjust stats of these two items. Mag adjust is basically a modifier for your spells. The canvas has a 122, while the other one only has a 118, so we're going to equip that. Basically what that means is my spells are more betterer when I'm equipped with that one. That was the heal miracle. You'll notice that its counter went down from 5 to 4, and our health went up. Basically, every time you rest at a bonfire, you get all castings of a spell back. There's no concept of MP in this game. It's simply about managing the number of castings you have of any given equipped spell. As I mentioned earlier, I did gain a new attunement slot, which I could attune the same spell in to give myself 10 castings instead of 5. Every attunement slot basically can hold one spell, although some spells that we'll find later in the game actually take up 2 slots because they're so good. One other move that this game doesn't really tend to tell you about is the jump. Now, there isn't a standard jump in this game. However, if you run and then press the run button mid-run, you'll jump just like that. And that's how you get to this area that we kind of looked at earlier, which had the broken walkway between the two buildings. And now we're back where we started once again. Time to continue on in the level and to see what else there is to explore here in the Undead Berg. Now you notice above here, there's a couple undead throwing firebombs at us. We better scoot across this bridge, only to get attacked by a couple axe-wielding undead. And then this guy kicks in the door and wants to know what the hell's going on in here. And we let him know. This is yet another shortcut that we'll be coming back to quite a bit later in the game. It's interesting because in a way I'm actually making the game look easier because I know where all the enemies are and where to find all the loot and all that other stuff. The really exciting thing about Dark Souls, what really makes it neat, is just jumping in and exploring the levels and trying to figure out how everything works. It's really a game of trial and error, and sometimes it can be a little frustrating to die and lose all your stuff right after you feel like you found something neat. But generally speaking, it can be incredibly rewarding to explore a bunch of a level and then make it back to a bonfire, rest, and actually keep the stuff that you found. This is another particularly dangerous encounter, so I like to just walk up here, aggro this guy, who seems to have a much higher aggro radius, and then just wait for him to show up. He'll throw some fire bombs and then come running in, and we'll give him a fair greeting, and go say hi to his friends. I'm about to show you how usable items work. So we're going to pop into our inventory, and you see I have these 5 items equipped. I'm sorry, I brushed right past that. Basically, these are the 5 items that I can use from the main game screen. So I equip the throwing knives, and then I start chucking them at these dudes. It's also important to note that the game never pauses. This game has absolutely no pause functionality whatsoever. Whether you're in a menu, whether you're managing your inventory, whether you open up live and walk away, the game is running in the background, so always make sure you're in a safe spot before you decide to take a break. The nice thing about these firebomb wielding guys is that sometimes they drop firebombs for us. Now, the merchant that we encountered earlier sold a residence key. That key would have opened that door, but the key cost 1,000 souls, so we saved 1,000 souls by having our master key with us instead. The master key does not open every locked door in the game, or even the majority. There's only a few that it unlocks, but the ones that it unlocks can be pretty handy. Now you'll notice that when I went out there and picked up that gold pine resin, which I'll talk about in just a second, we actually aggroed the spearman. This is actually a really good way to pull that guy so you don't end up pulling the other ones that he's walking around with. And there I use a firebomb to great success. You'll also notice that my humanity counter has actually gone up by 1. There's an interesting mechanic in the game where basically every enemy you kill adds to a counter that over time slowly fills up, and if it fills up, will grant you a humanity. This counter exists in the background of the game. There's no real way to quantify or understand how it's working, and if you ever kill the area boss for a location, the counter immediately stops working and will no longer reward you humanity for killing enemies. Basically what this means is as you grind on enemies and attempt to make it through an area, you have a possibility of earning humanity. However, once you kill the area boss for a level, you'll no longer be able to gain humanity in that particular fashion. Now this looks totally safe up here. This doesn't even look a little bit like a trap. But it is one. Very easy to avoid trap, but particularly dangerous if you accidentally get hit. That flaming barrel is not messing around. Now before we head up there, let's just take a look at a thing I'm not going to be messing with. You see that badass dude down there with the awesome looking armor? Yeah, we're going to leave him alone. That's a Black Knight. Black Knights have a particularly potent moveset and are very dangerous. If you can kill one, they drop quite a bit of souls and have a small chance to drop some pretty good loot, but frankly, at this point, it's just not worth even trying. Pretty soon I'll be able to take him down, though. This is another door that the master key opens. This door leads to a particularly dangerous foe that I'm not even looking forward to defeating even a little bit, but we're going to need to fight him eventually because he drops a really good ring. However, for now, we're just going to leave it alone and continue on up here. Don't mind me, just rolling on some barrels. Actually, there was a reason for that. I thought these were the barrels. Basically, you can see that little glowing lizard down there. That's a crystal lizard. These guys are particularly interesting foes, as they just run away from you. They only appear once per playthrough. That is, they will never respawn after being killed, but they drop really cool loot. This is Titanite. Titanite is basically the crafting material of Dark Souls. You'll be collecting quite a wide variety of different types of Titanite throughout the game, and they'll all be used to increase the stats of your various weapons, armor, shields, etc. The crafting system in Dark Souls is particularly complex, and I'll be detailing it at a later date. This doesn't look particularly ominous at all. Now, I go to equip an item here, which is actually a mistake because it can't be used with the Astora Straight Sword, but it still brings up an interesting point. This is gold pine resin. It's an item that can be applied to your weapon to give it basically an extra boost of lightning damage. Many enemies in this game are weak to lightning, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but we're getting ready for a big fight. You also notice that I've equipped my sword in both hands, which increases its attack power. Oh god, run away. Yep, it's time to fight the Taurus Demon, our first real boss fight of Dark Souls. The Asylum Demon is a good learning experience, but the Taurus Demon can actually be a rather unforgiving boss unless you know what you're doing. We're going to be, however, using the exact same technique we used on the last guy, and dropping on top of him for a fierce 585 points of damage. It's a strong starter. Now, the Taurus Demon himself doesn't have a particularly dangerous moveset, but what makes him so difficult is that he's in this tiny, tiny area. Basically, we don't have a lot of maneuverability. What's nice about him is he's slow and relatively predictable. All we have to do is just dodge out of the way of his attacks, stab him in the crotch. You'll note that even though he's nearly dead, you gotta take your time, heal up, and stay focused. Never assume the boss fight is over until it's actually over. I can't count the number of times I've died in a boss fight thinking it was done, only to have the boss kill me, because I got too aggressive. That said, we've killed the Taurus Demon, picked up some humanity and Homeward Bone, a good hefty sum of souls, as you'll see in just a second, and access to the next area, the Undead Parish. He also dropped his Great Axe, which is actually pretty lucky. His Great Axe is a big, big fucking axe, which hopefully if we get enough strength, we'll try wielding at some point. And there's actually a pretty good little bit of loot here hidden behind these boxes. That's a large soul of a lost undead. It's worth quite a bit more souls than the... And before we cross this ominous-looking bridge, let's go meet probably the coolest character in the game after we fail to open this door. That's right, it's the Sun Bro whom we aspire to be. Solaire.
Hello. You don't look hollow, far from it. I am Solaire of Astora, an adherent of the Lord of Sunlight. Now that I am undead, I have come to this great land, the birthplace of Lord Gwyn, to seek my very own son. You find that strange? Well, you should. No need to hide your reaction. I get that look all the time. Oh, aha. So I didn't scare you. I have a proposition, if you have a moment. The way I see it, our fates appear to be intertwined. In a land brimming with hollows, could that really be mere chance? So what do you say? Why not help one another on this lonely journey? This pleases me greatly. Well then, take this. We are amidst strange beings in a strange land. The flow of time itself is convoluted, with heroes centuries old phasing in and out. The very fabric wavers, and relations shift and obscure. There's no telling how much longer your world and mine will remain in contact. But use this to summon one another as spirits, cross the gaps between the worlds, and engage in jolly cooperation. Of course, we are not the only ones engaged in this, but I am a warrior of the sun. Spot my summon signature easily by its brilliant aura. If you miss it, you must be blind. Oh, hello there. I will stay behind to gaze at the sun. The sun is a wondrous body, like a magnificent father. If only I could be so grossly incandescent.
Yeah, so what Solaire has basically given us is the ability to be summoned into other players' games to engage in jolly cooperation. Basically, I can use that item, it places down a summoning sign, another player can tap it, and then I will play in their game and help them defeat bosses or play the game, or perhaps survive surprise dragon encounters on bridges. Yeah, no, I'm not so good at that, actually. On the plus side, he killed all those undead, and I got all the souls for it. It is at precisely this moment that I realized that I hadn't actually ever gone and rested at the bonfire early on in the Undead Berg, and that I had basically been playing with fire this entire time. I honestly don't know really how I survived, but I'm really thankful that I did. Of course, that lessens the coolness of this shortcut a little bit, but basically, what we've just unlocked is access back to that same bonfire from above. This is just a really good example of the incredible level design of this game. So here we now have access back to the initial part of the game, but we've unlocked this shortcut that brings us to the next area that we're supposed to clear. Well, we've killed one boss, we've gathered quite a bit of souls, and we've explored the first part of the Undead Berg. I'd say overall this was a pretty successful first session. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time when we explore the Undead Parish on Let's Play Dark Souls.